info about that at a later date, but we'll go ahead and get started with today. What I really wanted to do was go over a lot of the offers that Damari's got. I have found in the past that I'm not with you all when you go and you look at houses and you're submitting offers. And so I don't know, and especially a lot of you probably have never had a listing. And so I want to be able to teach you all kind of what some of the things to expect so that you can then warn whenever you're having your first listing appointment and you're meeting with a seller, you can kind of give them education on, what kind of offers come through. What does the process look like? So we're going to thank you, Damaris, for letting us do this with your personal house. But we're going to look at what some of these people said when they called her, what she told them, and then what they put in an offer. Because I think a lot of them shot themselves in the foot and probably screwed things over with their client. And I would hate for that to be you. And because I'm not with you all every day when you're submitting offers, I don't know what you do say, what you don't say, what you necessarily put in your offers or don't put in your offers. Most of you who are new, I look over all your offers and help you put it together. So that's a little different. But as time goes on, you just want to be aware of what you might, not what you're doing wrong necessarily, but hey, how you could probably improve just in case you are doing some of the things that these people are doing. The other thing is it's good to kind of get a general pulse on where the market's at and what people are offering in today's market. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we're going to go over a lot of these offers. Feel free to stop me at any point, anyone, to ask some questions. But we're going to pull this up. So Damari's listed her house. It's pretty well, I would say it's pretty well renovated. That flooring, it was like a tile flooring. So it's nice. It's durable. It's not new, but that's okay. So it's not like a fresh style, but it's still new. She's got, a really beautiful kitchen. It's like for the most part, it's an open concept, but I mean, kind of not really. There's no island, but there is, pantry cabinets. It has a decent sized backyard, a good sized patio that's covered. It's like sandwiched in an L shape. So it's right here, and then a church has a parking lot behind it, and the church is right next to it, which is to some people might be nice because there's, not a lot of people coming, or it's not another neighbor. But for other people, it might not be a good thing. It is pretty close to a busy road, but still somewhat set back. And then a lot of the houses around it, the cars seemed really nice. So it just kind of seemed like a, pretty, somewhat nicer of a neighborhood. But this is right off of Rio Linda Boulevard in Sacramento. So 2 blocks away is going to be pretty rough. 1 block another direction might be really nice. So, and she listed at 380. So comparable wise, I had a feeling because I met with her and her husband to look over it, and her ex, and we looked at everything. And I said, here's the thing: is there's a lot of places that are all over the place, but they also sold, more last year. And because we are in the new year and this is springtime, I think you're going to get a lot more offers for your house. I think it's good to list at 380. I figured that was low, but a good chance that we get up to 395. She ended up getting offers at 410. She got a couple of them. So there's a couple things I want to go over. And so let's see. Here's the first one. So this was the first offer she got. And so this was, so she had someone call that said, hey, I want to submit an offer, but can you make a decision today? And she said, no, I really wanted to make a decision by Tuesday. I've got family stuff going on. I just need a little bit of time. And I think they ended up calling back again and saying, hey, I'm going to submit now. Can you make a decision by Sunday? And she said, I'll just give me a little bit more time. And so they put the expiration for Monday evening, even though she had said, Tuesday, but that's fine. So if we're looking over this offer, this is not that first offer. This was just a random one that came in. They called. Now, Damari's, when people called you, I'm sorry, she's home with a sick kid, so she might be a little busy.
No, I'm here.
Okay, yeah. Did this first one, did they call you and ask you any questions?
That one is the 403.
What was that?
Is this one the 403?
This one, yes, this one's the
Okay,
403.
yes, they actually call me just yeah, they did call me like the guy who offered 410 called me first. He was the first one who called me and he said that their clients wanted to put an offer and he asked me like where are you standing? But before that I was talking to Nate and we were talking about going for 400, right? And so I told him, look, I'm at 400 right now, and he said right away, I offer you for 10. And I was like, well, submit the offer. But he was pressuring me, right? And I'm like, give me some time. Later, this lady called me, this agent called me, and she asked me, like, where was I standing? And I said, for 400, because I didn't receive the offer of 4K by then. And so she said that their clients were pretty interested and they were gonna put in an offer, and they sent this one. And they called me back to make sure if I got it and everything, and I said, yes, that's fine.
Now they
And
included a seller in possession form. Did they ask you if you wanted a rent back?
uh, they asked me, she asked me where was I standing, what things I wanted, kind of, and I said that I was looking forward to rent back. And so they put in that in there, which
Yeah.
it gave me like an idea, like, oh, I can get that. I mean, I honestly, I'm going through a lot, and it didn't cross in my mind that I should be saying that to everybody who was calling me, right?
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes we,
um,
we put it in the MLS, sometimes we don't. It just kind of depends. And so for her, it's something that she had to kind of think about, if I got a 30-day escrow, do I still need a rent back or not? And so it's
yes,
not something that, when I was coaching her to put the listing on the MLS, I wouldn't have put it because you kind of want to see what people are willing to offer. And so
hmm
she had a few people give a seller in possession. Now, when I reviewed this quickly, so I saw it and I saw, okay, 21 days, nice. Okay. And then that says $0, which is great. And then I scrolled down to the main page of the offer, the first page. So I thought, okay, 403, good offer. Initial deposit. Typically, I'm seeing this. It's like barely over 1%. I typically put around 2% because I've noticed that I will get less people countering me back over this. The lower I put, the more likely it is that a listing agent's going to want me to increase it. And I don't want to have to go back and forth because that increases the chance of another offer randomly coming in. And now I'm competing. So they listened to what she said and they put a 30-day escrow. They put, that amount, but that's the one thing I've noticed a lot of people don't do. I've had listing agents say, hey, I can tell someone very experienced taught you how to put together a contract. I said, oh, what makes you say that? And they said, well, you put a good initial deposit amount. Now remember, this is for liquidated damages. I mean, if someone canceled, I mean, the seller doesn't just get this. This is not a security deposit. And so it's funny to me that people put a huge emphasis on it. I do think to an extent it's a good way to filter people out. It's a good way to see how experienced the agent is, in my opinion, if they put a really low amount or not. But regardless, there are other things I looked at. So I was like, oh, 403, that's a great price. It's good because one, there's no confidentiality agreement that came with this offer. So she can technically tell people she has an offer over 400,000 because you can't lie. Um, and then they scroll down. So it is conventional, right? And so they're putting 5% down, which is fine. That's not the end of the world. It is conventional. It's not FHA. Not to say that that's bad or anything. Her house is really clean. And so I think an FHA borrower would be perfectly fine. Same thing with VA. So we scroll down, no credits from the seller to the buyer. Keep scrolling down. Now, they didn't lower the loan contingency, but they did reduce the appraisal, which is nice, and they reduced the investigation of the property to 14 days. So that's good. They at least reduced that. Yeah, they checked the box. Now this is where it kind of got them. And so if you come over here, this is what I typically look at, is that they put, seller, which I usually see that, but then it's seller, 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 and it's like, okay, well, you might have put 403, but if I ran a net sheet, this is a lot less than if I got an offer at 400 with 50-50 split, 50-50 split, 50-50 split, right? So at least she put Old Republic Title, which is the title company we said, so at least she listened. And then that's it. So then the next offer, so we reviewed it and I said, okay, that's a good offer. That came in on, when was the 17th? Was that a Saturday? Yes, that was Saturday. So they sent this offer on Saturday. Then on Sunday, another offer came in. So this is this guy, Eddie. Let's check out Eddie's offer here. Like I said, stop me if anyone has any questions, but what was that? Oh, I saw something. So the thing with Eddie's offer is they did 380. So that's her list price. Now, DeMarty's, did Eddie here call you?
Honestly, I am not sure because I had a lot of people calling me.
So
And
let's just say
so
he if he did, he screwed it up for his client. If he didn't, he
I
screwed it
think
up for his
he
client.
did because I have two Eddie offers, right? I
What?
believe there's two I have two offers with an Eddie. I
Oh, I have no
believe
idea.
so.
Yeah.
So
I mean, at the end of the day, the problem was if he didn't call, he should have so that he knew where offers were at. If he did call and she said, I have offers over the list price or over 400 or I'm at 400 or whatever, and they still put 380, right? Then they kind of screwed it up. So 25-day close of escrow is pretty quick. Or, I mean, that's good. Once again, here's that 1% that I was talking about. It's an FHA deal. Let's scroll down. Seller to see, it's just, there's a box, you guys. If it kills me, there's a box right here. Seller credit, if any, to buyer that you check and you can put the amount. And this guy typed it. I mean, why? You don't have to put that it's a 2-1 buy down. Gosh, it says it right there. Why don't you just check the box and put the amount? But so okay, right there. Seller to contribute 2% towards recurring and non-recurring closing costs. Now, this guy, I mean, you never know. This guy may just have a client who wanted to put an offer at their list price and they didn't want to go over and they just wanted to submit the offer anyway and see what happens. I definitely would still encourage that because you never know. Like Damari's could get into contract with this current buyer, they cancel, and they're still the only one still out looking. And at least she knows what they want to ask for. So they put that. You don't have to put a 2-1 buy down because the lender just picks that and it becomes part of their closing costs. So you just put a credit. So if they do a temporary rate buy down, it's still just a credit towards closing costs. So I scroll down. Here's the other thing is when it comes to investigation of the property, I pretty much always want to reduce that. I mean, one of the main reasons, as many of you have experienced, is I don't want another house coming on the market. And now my client's like, well, wait, what if that's a better deal? Should I switch and go for that house? Because I don't want to waste my time. And I know that there's going to be issues with that house too. So I'd rather us get inspections done quickly. Now, if this is a property out in the country, like way up in the hills, you have wells, you have propane tanks, you have septic systems. Sure, then I'll try to leave it at 17 days because I need enough time for someone to come and investigate that property. But that does not mean, and I run into this a lot, and I've had a lot of loan officers try to tell me one thing, but it's not the case. This is for investigating the property, not fixing it. So, and clients will ask about this too. So like, let's say I put 10 days, we get inspections done in 7, the water heater's busted. We submit a request for repairs that the seller replace the water heater, and the seller agrees to it if we remove our inspection contingency, because the contingency is about inspections. And if they're agreeing to it, then they've agreed to it. What happens if they don't do it? We take them to small claims court. I mean, it's just a lawsuit. They didn't do what they were contractually obligated to do. So I do get a lot of times where lenders think that you have to keep that contingency in place until the repairs are completed. I don't know why they're saying that because that's not the case. But For this person, they probably should have shortened that because it looks better. I mean, who wants to wait 17 days for a buyer to make up their mind, if that makes sense to everyone? So once again, though, he did 25 days, no seller occupancy. So this person probably did not call. I'm going to guess. And if they did, then they just didn't really listen. She also was telling people that the refrigerator was not included. And so what we're going to see an offer where they did check that box, and it's like, okay, I know listing agents that if I say it to you or if I put it in the MLS and you still check the box, they pretty much, your offer's shot. So this thing right here, not applicable. That was not applicable to even type that out. So I don't know why they did that. Someone's teaching them something. There is a natural hazards disclosure now that is called seller's choice because they thought that they would be smart and if they made their company seller's choice and everyone had to use them. So I started typing seller may choose. But right, so that he put seller. And then once again, each to pay their own fees. That can be a little confusing because it's usually just one set fee, but whatever. And then seller, right? And so here's a lot of seller and kind of a lower offer. So that was that one. They did include a pre-approval letter. Oh, so this is interesting. So they did include, never mind. So here's their pre-approval letter, right? Sometimes you got to make sure that it at least matches up. Sometimes it doesn't. All right, now here's this one. Here's another Eddie. So Eddie here. All right, so Eddie's offer. Now, if there's typos, I don't really like if I'm the listing agent, I'm not going to critique people because it just depends on what their offer is, right? So Eddie's offer is a little weird. I don't know what's with his purchase agreement is lined up weird. I don't understand why, but anyway. So yeah, put 390. So I don't know. This Eddie, one of the Eddies had to have called Demaris, and so one of them did not listen. He did put expiration of the offer to be Sunday. And so at 3 o'clock, which to me, it probably indicates that they might be also offering on another house only because she had told multiple people, I'm not going to make a decision that quickly. And the person that was calling her, trying to pressure her to make a decision that quickly was not this person. Right, Demaris?
Sorry, I had to run to my phone. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't him.
It wasn't him. So he probably should have, like, if I'm going to put that, I'm going to call and explain why or text it or say something. Let's see what he said in his email. Yeah. Didn't really put anything. Some people put like a summary of what the offer is. I don't think you necessarily have to do that. Right, not FHA. It's conventional. Nothing there. 10-day, 10-day, 10-day. So that's good to see. And then we came down once again. So this person, they put refrigerator. The refrigerator was not included. And then seller. Like if I want someone to make a decision quickly, I'm going to put 50-50 split, or I'll even put that the buyer pays for certain things. Like I want to make it seem very enticing. Yeah. So that was that one. She sent that to me. And then he did include, this is the first one so far that included a bank statement to show proof of funds. I'm trying to find. So let's look at this one. So this is the offer. Oh, so this is Billy. So if we scroll down, so Billy did 395, 21-day close of escrow, 1%. Let's see, did they do, and then a credit, right? So we always want to make sure that we see this. And so if I only have a couple offers and they're all asking for a credit, I'm going to call and say, hey, how come you're asking for a credit? Does the buyer absolutely need it in order to close escrow? And sometimes people will say yes, no. They don't necessarily need it. We just figured we'd ask. So it depends. She also checked this box, which I did not see before. But they probably already have a buyer. But she should have included this in with the offer, just so that if you check this box and your buyer broker agreement says 3%, and I'm offering 2.5%. Well, that's a little frustrating. So they should have, and I do think it's supposed to be attached. She may have attached it. We'll see. They did reduce all of these. And then same thing, the trend that I was seeing with a lot of these offers is they're asking for seller, 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 seller. Now, what I want you all to keep in mind, is if I put for a buyer at 2%, it's usually to cover the closing costs. Now, Viviana asked me, and I think it's a good idea. So next week we're going to do a class on Thursday on mortgages. I'm possibly do, so we'll do. I mean, like all kinds of things that I think will really help you all, not just mortgage basics. So things like, what are what are some of the closing costs that you're going to see? Sorry, dog is driving me crazy. What are some of the closing costs you're going to see? What does buying down an interest rate look like? What are points? What are stuff like that? So if someone put 2%, to me, that means that they need 2% towards closing costs. So if I'm going to put 2%, then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to put 50-50 split on everything. But let's say, otherwise, I'm going to try to see, hey, if I have the seller pay for the escrow fees, the owner's title insurance policy, the county transfer tax, and the city transfer tax, I'm going to either put that in a net sheet on my phone, or I'm going to ask the lender and say, roughly how much are her closing costs or their closing costs going to be? And so then I can put that as a smaller credit. That way it just looks a little bit better. So there's two different ways you can put it, right? I can put the whole credit here, but you don't want to do both. I don't want to put that the seller pay all of the buyer, give a credit towards all of the buyer's closing costs and have the seller pay the majority of the closing costs, right? Most of the closing costs are going to come from the lender, but this is still going to be quite a few $1,000s. And so she should have picked one or the other, in my opinion, but that's that. And then, so I want to see, so did she attach the buyer broker agreement is the question. I could almost bet money the answer is going to be no. Your protection, homeowner inspection. Yep, here we go. Well, that's not the buyer broker agreement. So this is the wrong form. Seller payment to buyer's broker. Or yeah, whatever. See here. Okay. So we want to scroll up to, so that was the same one, right? Okay, so here's the offer she ended up going with. And so here's a fun one for us. So this offer came in. He called her, I think, on like Friday, pressuring her to make a decision by Saturday. Then did not submit the offer until Sunday, right, Damaris? And put that this expires Monday, but did call and say, hey, will you make a decision tonight? And she just was honest. She just said, I just took my brother home from the hospital or whatever. I just just give me a day. And so he said, okay. And so luckily, I mean, and good for him. I mean, you kind of have to feel it out a little bit. There are some agents that are going to take that the really wrong way. There's some agents, like I used to always put that my offer expire pretty quickly, like the next day. And I had a couple agents tell me, so are you telling me that by tomorrow your client doesn't want this house? Because that makes me really nervous accepting it with a 10-day or 15-day inspection period. Are they just going to change their mind after a couple days? I'm like, no, we just want a response. Well, we'll get you a response quickly, but I don't want to hear that the buyer's going to just pull out that quickly. So he kind of felt it out, and you do have to be careful of some agents. I knew an agent back when I was with Coldwell Banker. I mean, she's an amazing agent now, but her first ever deal was a listing, and the guy pressured her so much that she was at her kid's sporting event, like up in the hills where she didn't have service. And so she left her kid's sporting event to drive down, call her seller, and get him to accept the offer because the guy wanted a decision within 2 hours or he was pulling the offer. And I'm like, okay, then pull your offer. What you're telling me that a buyer is that finicky? I mean, right. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. But this guy probably felt it out a little bit. He wants a decision because if I look at it, it is a good offer. He's offering 410,000. He's giving her what she wants. So a 30-day escrow. He did do we'll get to that in a second, a rent back, but right, that's he basically gave her a 30-day rent back for free, or the offer did, but they're also putting 30% down, and it's conventional. So the nice thing about this is when we looked at the comparables, I wasn't too sure if this is going to appraise over 405. I think there's a good chance it could. And so I do think there's a good chance this property will appraise, but I'm not 100% sure based on the comparables I could find. And so hopefully this appraises, but knowing that they're putting 30% down, it's going to be a lot easier for, like, let's say it under appraises by 5,000. It's going to be a lot easier for us to say how much of a payment difference, right? I'm going to look, Damari's is going to call me and she's going to say the house didn't appraise. It came in at 5,000 less, so 405, and they're wanting me to reduce the purchase price. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my mortgage calculator as hopefully her preferred lender partner, or you all can call whoever, and say what's the difference in a monthly payment with today's rates. If I had decent credit, I'm putting 30% down on a conventional loan. What's the difference in $5,000 loan payment? And so I'm going to use that as leverage to try to get them to not reduce the purchase price. Now, what's probably going to happen is they're going to do inspections and they're going to ask her for a credit or for some things to be fixed or whatever. If this under appraises, then we're going to try to get them to do one or the other. We're either going to get them to reduce the purchase price or give a credit towards repairs, but not both, because they have room. For someone who they're putting 5%, 3%, 3.5% down, if it under appraises, if I want them to be the buyer, I have to reduce the price. Does that make sense to everyone? I'm going to pause. So if anyone doesn't understand that. Technically speaking, even if they're putting 30% down, this might be the only thing they could afford. Like, I had a loan recently where they were putting pretty much 30% down, but that was like, if that appraised for less, they had no room to go up in purchase price in loan amount, because it would push them over the debt to income ratios for qualifying. So if that ever happens to you and you have a listing where someone's saying that, I would just tell the lender, send me we call it the DU findings. And so we're going to go over this next week a little bit, but basically I want to see where it says what their debt to income ratio is, because I'm going to try to call their bluff. So I'm going to say, yes, I'm willing to reduce my price, but I want to see proof that you're not defrauding the seller, and that really is, they do have a high debt to income ratio, even with 30% down. So this is good because some of the other ones, even if they went to 410, because typically whenever you guys have listings and whenever I have listings, I'm going to send a counter offer to everyone, because I've had it where I had one listing where we had 15 offers and I sent 15 counter offers to make them all the same. I had only 3 reply back, and one of them countered and offered even more. So they offered, like, we were asking for a $10,000 appraisal gap, and they increased it to 20,000, and they increased the purchase price by 5,000. And I was not expecting that from them. And so typically you would want to do that, but for someone like this, when all the other offers, it said 3.5%, 3%, 5%, they're not going to, unless if they're, and most of them were asking for credits, I would just go with this one, because if it under appraises, which we're kind of worried about, I know that there's a good chance they're going to have room to make up the difference, possibly. That's not to say that they will, but because they have that contingency. So they did, this is a funny thing. So seller credit, if any, to buyer. He checks this box and there's nothing there. And we're like, and I said, Damari's, did he say that they were going to ask for a credit? And she said, no, he told me they were not going to ask for a credit. And so I said, okay, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can either counter them. You can have them just resubmit the offer without that checked box. Like this guy who wanted such a quick decision, Damari said, well, it's hard for him to get a hold of his client. I would have thrown if it was me personally, I probably would have thrown just a little bit bigger of a fit. Like, hey man, you want me to make a decision quickly, but you're checking boxes with nothing in it. Can you just resubmit your offer? He also says he types out seller to remain in possession for 1 month. 1 month, that's not how we do things, because what does 1 month mean, right? How many days are in February versus March? I think is there 30 days in March or 31 days, but there's 28 days in February, although I think this is a leap year, right? Anyone knows? Does anyone know? No? Okay. So to me, here's my thing is you have to check the box. You can't just type it out there. Seller to remain in possession, because if it's, and he checked the box, or he sent us SIP. So the SIP is for 29 days or fewer, because the seller is not a tenant at that point. The second you hit 30 days or more, the seller becomes a tenant. Now, in that form, in these two forms, the language and the terms and the who has what rights it's spelled out. So that's why we do not type things out like this, because you completely miss the majority of the terms that are in that contract. Same thing with things like, is it free? He put it a free rent back for 1 month, but he did not put if there was going to be a security deposit or not. No rent will be charged for 1 month if seller requests for 1 month, whatever. So it was not, he did not include if there's going to be a security deposit, even if you did an SIP, which that form would say it. So we asked him, hey, can you send a seller in possession form so that we can accept your offer? He sends it and puts 30 days in the SIP. So to save us all a lot of time, because clearly this guy had a lot going on or something, we just said, okay, fine. We're not going to counter him to clarify that this is zero. If there's nothing there, it's zero. Does that make sense to everyone? If there's nothing there, it's zero. It's the same thing with city transfer tax. If there is no city transfer tax and I put seller, how much of a city transfer tax do you think the seller pays? The answer is zero. But you will always get listing agents who say, hey, you put that the seller pay a city transfer tax and I have to counter you because there is no city transfer tax. I'm like, if there's no city transfer tax, then it's nothing. So it's not the end of the world. But okay, there is a city transfer tax here. So yes, he put nothing. That's fine. 12 days, 12 days. Let's scroll down. But he did, so he put seller, of course, for carbon monoxide, water heater strapping, and smoke alarms. He did do 50-50 split, did not put escrow holder. What we typically do if you do that is whoever you send the contract to and say, can you open escrow? They just, as long as we all agree, we all just move forward. You don't have to necessarily counter someone. But yeah, owner's title insurance seller, but that's not a lot of money. And at least they put 50-50 on both of these as well. They did put seller, but right, they went up to 410. You don't want to nickel and dime someone too much. So it was reasonable enough to accept this. Plus there was a long free rent back. And so that was that offer. Once again, he sent a pre-approval letter. She could have possibly called this person just to kind of get clarification about anything, make sure. I have called lenders in the past who said, I'm not even sure who you're referring to. Honestly, I think I know who you're talking about. I just got their file this morning. I'm like, oh shit, no. I'm not moving forward with you as the lender or them as the buyer, because I have no idea if you're going to be able to do the loan or not, because you just got their file. Sometimes if they're very straightforward, you can, then it works. But I've had it where it became a 2-month delayed escrow, 2 months. But okay, so then they sent proof of funds. Now they're putting 180 something thousand down. So obviously ending balance 41, and scrolling down, they showed another one with 132. So they have enough funds to close escrow. Then she got a couple more offers, but same thing. They just kept putting that the seller pay the majority of the closing costs or asking for credits. So she just decided to accept that offer. I told her, go back and tell all of those ones, hey, would you like to be in backup position? But I wouldn't send them a backup offer or a counter offer, not necessarily. So what I would do in today's market, because rates are constantly going up and down, is if you find out rates dramatically improve, then I would just put the house back on the market. If I find out that rates have gotten worse, then I'm going to reach out to some of those other ones that were asking for a credit and seeing if they're still interested in the property. Why? Because if rates have gotten worse, there's a good chance that I'm going to get less people looking at the house, and it's going to show a lot longer days on market. I want to go back to someone and say, hey, it sounds like my current buyer is going to be canceling. I wanted to offer it to you because you expressed being in backup position. Sorry, it's been crazy. I wasn't able to send you a backup offer, but I'm willing to keep it off the market and offer it to your client if they're still interested based on the terms that they presented. And if they say, well, right, because I want them to, I don't want them to come back and offer even less than what they originally offered. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about any of that? Or any comments? Viviana, anything from your experience? Nice. Now, if we ever get into a market where something's, oh, Viviana.
Sorry, I just couldn't get to the mute button fast enough. Um, no, I think one thing I will say, I've had agents give me feedback on when we got an accepted offer, um, as to why they picked our offer. And there's one in Citrus Heights that just happened. They had 14 offers and they picked ours. Um, and the big thing he said was he got others very near the price range, if not the same as ours, but they went with ours because the communication that I had with him. So I, from the beginning, I'm like, hey, I'm interested in writing an offer. Like, what is it that your seller is wanting? So I am very clear as to like the rent back. Like, is there anything that they don't want to leave? Again, I just think
Mm-hmm.
about the offer in my head, and I want it to make it appealing, right? Because it, especially like many of them that are newer to the market, and I know it's going to be a competitive house. I want to stand out.
Yep.
And I typically always will I'm sorry, not remove, will decrease the days for inspections and after talking to the lender, of course, loan and appraisal, and see if
Yep.
we can pull that off. So it's also communicating with their loan officer on like, okay, can you help me be a team here and how can we make this offer appealing? Um, so on this one in particular, they were already underwritten, and so the loan officer was like, "You can remove the loan contingency if you want. Like it's a super clean file. Like we really are ready to go. They have a ton of money in their account for their funds and their down payment and all of that. So,
Mm-hmm.
that one in particular, we removed the loan contingency. We were decreased days for inspection and appraisal. Um, and again, the whole thing to the 50-50 split, I think that's super important too, because you can't just expect some, when they're looking at their net sheet, this one in particular was like, hey, splitting escrow costs is important to the seller. So we went 50-50 on everything.
Yeah. Like I always tell people that. For a while, I would always say, hey, we're looking for good terms. And I found that people have no idea what that means. And they just go, oh, yeah, okay, we'll come in with good terms. And then they don't. And I'm like, do you understand what terms mean? um, yeah. And so what she's talking about is right here in the contract, I will always reduce these three. Now, here's another thing. This is the only one I don't ever reduce, the informational access to property, because it's not a contingency for the sale. It just gives my borrower that permission to go to the property for at least 17 days after acceptance. Because if my client wants to go in, like I've had tons of clients who want to go take measurements for things. And sometimes you get sellers who are like, nope, you can't come to the house. And it's like, well, I just want to make sure we always have access so that my buyer doesn't get frustrated, because then they'll get frustrated at you. So I always leave that. But then these other ones I tend to reduce these as well. there's no real point to, but I'll tell you why. So the way it reads is 17 review of seller documents 17 days after acceptance or 5 days after delivery, whichever is later. So if the seller gives me documents or whichever is later. Oh yeah, never mind. Actually, misread that. So I tend to reduce these as well because what this technically means is that they have 17 days to review her seller disclosures, even though they put a 12-day inspection contingency. So I always tend to reduce all of these. Also, it to the eyes, because you're playing the game of what, like, no seller fully understands these contracts, right? So you're playing the game of what is the listing agent going to want? Where are they going to push their client? What are they going to understand? And if they don't understand a lot of things about the contract, what's going to just like pop out to them right away? And I've had negative feedback from people who said, honestly, we didn't accept your offer or counter because you didn't even reduce any of the contingencies. And I was like, oh, good to know. So even if you reduce that to 15 days on loan, 16 days on appraisal, it just to the eyes is going to look so much better, right, than a lot of other offers. I like to personally play the game of, keeping in mind that there are a lot of agents who are kind of lazy. And so if I can just make it a clean offer right from the beginning where they don't have to counter me on anything, they're going to just want to accept my offer because that's less paperwork they have to do. When I sent 15 counter offers, I'm not kidding. That took me from 8 a.m. to like 5:30 p.m. at night, just sitting, just because I had to look at the offer, say, okay, what terms am I putting in this counter offer? Send to my client loved me. I mean, she was like, I am so impressed. And the person who accepted, what they did is, because we were asking for an appraisal gap, which I felt bad for, but we just had so many people offer it. What they did is their client decided they could qualify with the down payment assistance program. And what they said is, hey, if the house under appraises, we'll just use whatever from the down payment assistance to cover that gap. And then you still have money to pay that extra out of pocket, if that makes sense. So this is something that if the market really improves and if you have a client who keeps losing out because people are offering appraisal gaps, that is an option, but we'll try to teach that next week at that class. Now, what Viviana said is great too. It's like, you know what? I'll call agents who will never call me back. I'll text agents, hey, I'm planning on submitting an offer, just looking for, what's the client looking for? No response. Or they'll say, come in with your highest and best. You get some agents who will counter you and say, submit your highest and best offer. I'm like, the F does that mean? What do you mean submit my highest? Like, what does that even mean? And I do think those agents are doing a big disservice for their client, because I would convince my clients to go higher if I even knew ballpark where we were at. And no, I'm not just going to offer some crazy amount. Like, I'm not stupid. And so my advice to my client is, let's go find a different house, because there's going to be a different one. And if they're just trying to get us to, I mean, a lot of clients can offer appraisal gaps. So what do you mean? I'm going to go 30,000 over with a huge appraisal gap for no reason? No. But there are some good agents. There are some good agents that you'll call, and they really appreciate you calling, because they've been through the ringer before where they had a buyer's agent who just totally disappeared and they could not get a hold. Like, I know agents that if they ever submitted an offer on one of my listings, no way in hell am I working with them, because I know them and they will never answer the phone. They've never worked with the lender before, and so it's probably going to go south. And I'm not going to be able to get a hold of them, and that's going to be frustrating. So it's also good to have a lender that's going to call. Even if they can't get a hold of them, at least call, because I just want to increase the odds, like Viviana said, of if they're an agent who really values that, I just want them to accept my offer. There's a couple other things that I would always consider, right? If I hear 15 offers, I'm going to submit a buyer letter. Well, first, what I'm going to always do is go to the MLS and read the confidential agent remarks. And I'm going to make sure I pay attention to everything they put in there. Because there's some people that say, do not submit a buyer letter. So the way that the rule is a listing agent and a seller, like, if you're a listing agent, you are not allowed to give, I'm sorry, but you're not allowed to give the buyer letters to your client, because you are opening a huge door to a fair housing law violation, because it's so easy to be able to show and say you and your client accepted that offer because of family status, something that they put in there, and that's why you didn't choose this other offer. And I tell my sellers that hey, I'm not gonna give you any buyer letter, because it's a big issue. And page 1 of the listing agreement is fair house, or page 2 is fair housing disclosures, and it does say that sellers have to abide by fair housing laws, and it gives examples of what it is. So, but on the buyer side, if I present it and you decide to give it to your client, well, that's on you. And that's no violation on my part. I just presented something to you. And so I tended to do that, because if I find out that there's multiple offers, because I've just found that people will make a decision faster. And sometimes you get people, like, to be completely honest, I had a client that it was a boyfriend and girlfriend. One time we submitted an offer on a house. We lost out on, not joking, 33 houses. 33 houses. 33. And we submitted one on, I called this agent. She said, we have offers at this price. I go, okay. So we came in with a really good offer, and she said, hey, we ended up going with someone else. I'm like, oh, did another one come in? Because I thought ours was going to be the best. And she said, well, there was another one that's similar to yours, but they submitted this beautiful letter about how they're a family with kids, and my client really wants the house to go to a family. And I was like, you just committed a fair housing law violation. Are you kidding? And she goes, nuh-uh, a seller can do whatever they want. And to make a long story short, they didn't care. They were like, screw that, we're just going to go for something else. The next house, I typed up a fake letter about how they're a family who has young kids, and they've been working really hard, but they don't have enough money for an appraisal gap and all this stuff. The next house we submitted an offer on, the seller said, we love the letter you wrote us. We want you to be the buyer. How about we do this? If the house under appraises, we'll do a basically we'll seller finance the difference, and it'll be non-secured, so the lender won't have an issue with it. And we said yes. The house appraised. They got the house. They pinned that letter on their fridge, and it's still up today. But it just, right. My job is to get my clients' offers accepted and get them in a house. And if I have been told several times that if a seller commits fair housing law violations, which I've had it happen several times, my client has to technically take them to court. Most of my clients, whenever I've presented that to them, they say no. And so I'd rather just submit my buyer letters if I hear that there's multiple offers. If it's a single individual, I just put, sorry, my dogs are going to bark really loud, but I just put that I just don't talk about it being a family. I just say they, and I just keep it general. The other thing that is really important for a lot of you to really start doing is a confidentiality agreement. Does that mean that the listing agent is going to listen to the confidentiality agreement? Not necessarily, but I want to increase the chances that they're not going to use that as leverage with someone else, if that makes sense. Like, they can still tell someone else, because legally they have to, that I have another offer, but they cannot give any details of your offer. But you can't prove it if they say it over the phone. But there's probably 70% of agents, 75% of agents have good morals, ethics, and character, and they're going to do the right thing. So, any other questions about any of that? I know it's kind of a lot, but I think a lot of you this spring are going to start getting a lot of buyers. The job market, basically unemployment rates came in higher than expected, which is bad but good for mortgage rates. And so I think there's a good chance the next 3 months, 2 to 3 months from now, as long as inflation doesn't skyrocket again, we're going to see mortgage rates start to drop. As of right now, they're higher than 2 weeks ago. Any questions, anyone? All right. Stop the recording.